So I'm really, truly excited to be meeting with you, Kyra, and Dr. Bobinet, who has written a book which I'm learning about called Unstoppable Brain: The New Neuroscience That Frees Us from Failure, Erases Our Stress, and Creates Lasting Change. I mean, who wouldn't want all of that? And so I was intrigued. I'm learning more about your book. And what I'd like to do just right off the top to just have you say briefly what the book is, who it's for, and just a summary. And then I want to ask you some more detailed questions about who you are and your background. But just say a little bit for the audience who may not have any idea what who you are or what this book is about.
Yeah, exactly. So basically the book is about a new area of the brain that is being found to be a master control switch of our behavior and our mood called the habenula. And it's the first anthology of that science and translating that into daily life and how we, might be trying to do a bunch of things and then we don't get them done. It's about our human experience. So I would say broadly it's for all humans, but it probably appeals most to people who really like to understand the why, the scientific why behind our experience as humans.
Interesting. So I shared just to briefly my own background. Graduating from college, I went to medical school. I was going to be a psychiatrist and found that medicine was really more restrictive
Yeah.
than I felt was needed in my life. And later went into graduate school and got a master's degree, and later went back to school and got a PhD in international health. So background is often interesting, and if you could say a little bit about your journey to
Yeah,
this spot in professional history and where you are,
sure.
and maybe how you came to write this particular book at this particular time.
Yeah, so I grew up all over and ended up in medical school at UCSF in San Francisco. Was, doing all the things I had set out to do, cancer research and head of my class, I was president of my class, and then I had a spiritual awakening in the middle of my first year of medical school, and that caused me to go in a different direction, which is just to listen for my path and to take leaps of faith, if you will. And that led me to start a program for incarcerated youth outdoors in nature and deal with young men who were primarily men of color from the Bay Area and usually about 16 to 18 years old. And they were labeled serious chronic violent offenders, but out there in the forest, we had a barefoot program, rain or shine, and they had to kind of endure the elements and get close to both themselves and the systems of nature. And in that environment, really opened up their hearts and I really saw them not for the few mistakes that they did that were, of course, really harmful and came from their own trauma, but for the bright light in them, the goodness in them. And, I'll say like aside from somebody who has, such severe mental illness where, that they're not safe to be around, it's really remarkable how beautiful their spirits are compared to everybody else, because they've been through such pain and suffering. And so after serving that for about that in that capacity for about 10 years, I went back to grad school at Harvard because I was no longer interested in writing prescriptions. And by that time, kind of to your experience, it seemed like all I had was 10 minutes per patient and then write a prescription or order a test or whatever. And I had this one patient in particular who came in with gout, and it was a very standard, straightforward case. And I asked him while I'm writing the prescription to save time, I'm like, so how'd this happen? And he said, well, doc, 3 days ago, I did meth and haven't been asleep since. So he did meth, didn't sleep, got dehydrated, then the dehydration caused the gout. And here I am writing a prescription for the gout. And there's just something so poignant about that for me. I was like, well, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to write a prescription for a toe when there's something else that's so much more glaringly obvious about this interaction, you know. And so I didn't go into addiction medicine, but I did go into public health at Harvard. And then I did large scale intervention design, trying to help millions of people with, you know, getting healthy, you know, being better. And that's from like birth to death and also, you know, wellness to illness. I had a full experience doing that, which led me to Stanford to the behavior design lab there and teaching at the medical school in behavior change. And, you know, then I wrote my first book at that point, started a company for behavior change, behavior design, and that morphed into a software company that is neuroscience based. And then wrote the second book, Unstoppable Brain, in April of 24. So that's the arc in a simplified
Wow,
way.
that's interesting. I didn't realize some of the connections you and I have. I went to UCSF medical school after I graduated
Wow.
from college, so
Wow.
I'm familiar there and left there and went to UC Berkeley and have worked in, you know, the Bay Area. And I also started out in addiction medicine and a lot of the young, particularly young men at the time, but women as well,
Yeah.
who had various problems and similar to you, really wanting to understand not just the symptoms of the surface and you know what kind of quick fix you can offer, but what underlies those. So, fascinating journey that you've been on, both in sounds like academic medicine and practical medicine, and then into broader areas of business and so on. So let's drill down a little bit more about the book itself and what's new, because you mentioned this new part of the brain, and I'd like to, you know, kind of delve into that a little bit more because I had never heard of that. I've been in, you know, I'm in the health field. You said you had not, so
Yeah.
maybe start with some of these new aspects that have not been known and how
Sure.
these came to be known and where this then fits in some of the new science and the new offerings that can be helpful to people in ways that haven't been available up until now.
Yeah, so the area of the brain that we're going to talk about is the habenula, Habenula. And it was discovered in the late 1800s as just an anatomical feature, but it's only about the size of a pea on both sides of the midline of the brain, both this way and this way. And so it's in the very, very, very center of the brain, and it's super tiny, so tiny that nobody studied it because we didn't have instruments until something called a 7T MRI came out. And that's a high resolution type of MRI that can get down to this level of tininess. So the data on it started to emerge in the later 20 aughts around, you know, what it does. And so the first early studies showed that, you know, if an animal was stimulated in this area of their brain, then they stopped trying. They just quit trying. They lost motivation. Another study in animals showed that if an animal was put in a situation where they were failing at what they were trying, this area of their brain would light up. So, putting those two things together, the early data showed if we think we fail at something or if we're being discouraged in any way, this lights up. And if it lights up, we lose our motivation to keep trying. So, that is a fundamental building block of everything we do or don't do. So that's the first sort of puzzle piece that hit the board. And then other research, you know, labs found both in humans and in really primitive animals like zebrafish that the habenula is in every animal. It's in every animal. And so that's a curious question, like why? Why is it in
Hmm.
every
Yeah,
animal?
what's it do? What's the
Yeah, what does it do?
evolutionary
Yeah,
advantage that, you know, keeps us
totally.
alive or does something?
You got it. You got it. And so basically, its job is to keep us alive. Because if you think ancestrally, if, you know, somebody ate poison berries, right? We want to be able to look at that as an onlooker and say, "Oh, I shouldn't do that." So it's our
Mm.
brakes. It's the don't do that
Ah.
in our brain that keeps us alive. Don't jump off of a cliff and think you can fly if you're a human. Don't touch the stove more than once,
Mm-hmm.
and those kinds of things. So it helps us learn from our mistakes.
Mm.
Yeah, it stops us. But the problem is that when it comes to our modern world, where we're trying to, manage our weight, manage our health, do things because we're in this realm of plenty, especially in this country, that there's so many opportunities to drug ourselves and food coma ourselves and all these things. It's our biggest obstacle now.
Mm.
Past, it was our biggest friend because it kept us
Gotcha.
alive. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So I get why it was not known. It's tiny. We haven't, up until relatively recently, had the equipment that could even see that there was something there,
Got
and
it.
then beginning to see what it does and what it should do evolutionarily, and why, like so much of our modern life, is out of sync with what we were built to do in most of our existence. So that's fascinating. Um, what you've shared a good deal about your background, which is fascinating enough. But I know from reading some things, and I see some of what you're wearing kind of also is of interest. But I had read that you are an enrolled member of, if I've got the name right, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe in
Yes.
Minnesota. Did I
Yep.
say that right?
You did.
Um, so my turns out my another thing we haven't. My wife is part Native American and different tribal connection, but similar probably in the the original people, certainly in our North America we share, who have lived for thousands of years in different ways in our modern life, and I'm guessing that some of that background informs some of the broader understandings maybe that you've had in addition to the very widespread medical health and business things. Could you talk a little bit about your background that way and how that informs your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came from a lineage of medicine people. My mom was cut off from that lineage because she was taken from her family at age 5 after her mother died of tuberculosis and put into a Indian boarding school and stripped of her culture and her language. And so my life journey has been about reconnecting to my tribe, to my culture on that side. I am active in a lot of ways at this point, even though I live in California. Me and my family go back to our home area every summer and spend time with the people there. And I am, going through a process of um, coming into relationship with our medicine society, for example. And so that has been kind of like an intuitive process for me to work with natural medicines, to work with herbal medicines and plant medicines and things like that, and nature itself throughout my life. I just didn't know how strong that was in my DNA. So I was acting it out. And then on my dad's side, he's Bohemian Czech. So they were farm people, they were gypsies, they were earth people too. And so he became a Western pharmacist. And so you put the two together and here I am.
Yeah. Well, very cool. That's
Mm.
another thing. My ancestral background on my side is Romanian back in Europe,
Oh,
and
wow.
my
Yeah.
interesting the Czech connection. My son married a Czech woman and lived in Czech for a number of years, and now they go back and forth here. So very
Nice.
interesting. So well, maybe talk more about how that has informed the book and where
Yeah.
things are. But
Yeah.
I know in the book you talk about the no do gap.
Yeah.
and I'm getting a sense of how that's connected to the this brain set. But talk about how that manifests in our day to day life and why that's important in what you're teaching people through the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for years and years, I had patients who would swear up and down, doc, yeah, I'm totally gonna go, quit smoking, or I'm gonna eat right and I'm gonna exercise. And then they would either ghost me, not come back, or, avoid me or feel, ashamed of themselves. Same thing with the youth. They would be like, I'm totally gonna change my life. And then like day one, they'd be out running with the gang again. And our society treats people like that pretty harshly. Medical professionals judge people for that, not doing what you said you would do.
Right?
And I had kind of, seen this pattern over and over again, not only in other people, but myself. I meant to not binge on that, but I did. I
Right?
meant to not eat the whole pot pizza, and I did. And this feeling of being out of control of your own behavior is a common thing. And then we blame ourselves, right? We blame ourselves for being unmotivated or not in control or having no willpower or whatever the case may be. And so it is a common source of frustration as humans. And I had a patient one time in a research study that I was doing who basically, I did a midterm interview with her to see how it was going. And she's like, oh, it's awesome. I'm losing weight, I'm eating right, I'm exercising. And then she pauses and she says, but I know what I should do. I just don't do it. Like, why don't I do it?
Mm,
And to me, that one sentence articulated what
mm,
I've been trying to figure out for decades. And that turned out to be the no-do gap, you know?
mm,
And so the biggest problem that people have is not that they can't think of what they want instead of what they're doing. It's not that they don't have a plan. It's not that they don't have a goal or that they don't have intelligence or resources or whatever. It's that they know what to do and they don't do it and they don't know why. And that's
right.
where the habenula sits, right at that juncture.
Mm,
When the habenula is triggered on, then you lose your motivation. You can't feel that. You just stop doing something that you wish you would do, or you don't do something you wish you would do. And then because there's no physical pain that is involved,
right.
you blame yourself because who else is at fault except you, right?
Right.
And then you feel depressed about that. So that's the circuit that is at the heart
Gotcha.
of everything that matters and everything that is causing people to feel discouraged, to feel like failures, to feel like they are getting nowhere or that I used to be able to do this, but I don't anymore, all of that.
Well, I can see how this applies to, almost every aspect of lives of what isn't working for so many people who are smart. They've learned, they know what they should do, but the gap between the knowing and the doing, and this
Yep.
starts to uh, make it uh, understandable in some very new and significant ways. And I think everybody, I'm certainly one of the people who has dealt with weight issues throughout my life and know the right things, but don't always do it, and
Mhm.
then struggle in all the ways we do. And you're very aware, and I think almost everybody by now is aware of the new drugs that now, help people lose weight. And
Yeah.
there's lots of different
Yeah.
brands, but they have become the latest thing, and there's been pros and cons, but everywhere, that has become, I think, a major quick fix in some ways. And I wonder if you could talk about both the quick fixes that people are
Hmm.
looking for to solve problems that haven't seemed solvable before,
Yeah. Yeah.
and where what you're talking about either fits with that or in some
Yeah.
way is a different approach than the quick weight loss jabs that people are doing now.
So it's all related. So basically, what we're talking about is that the habenula is the master control switch of all behavior. All decisions your sleep, your hunger, all your behaviors, what you do and don't do. It controls dopamine, it controls serotonin, it controls your attention, it is the source of your negative self-talk. It
Ah.
is the source of addictive cravings. It is the source of addictive withdrawal pain. So the habenula basically, whenever it gets triggered by some negative emotion, then it causes your motivation to lose, and then you feel bad, and then you reach for something to make the pain go away. So it's called the anti-reward pathway, meaning that it makes you feel bad. Its job is to make you feel bad. And we reach for food, we reach for drugs, we reach for what, name your drug of choice, like all those things. We reach for those in order to shut the habenula up so
Mm.
that we just can kind of escape from it because we feel so itchy and so bad. Then when we stop using, let's say we have a moment of like, I shouldn't do this anymore. As we withdraw, what happens is that we hear the habenula again, and it's painful and it's itchy, and it's like we want to crawl out of our skin. That's that withdrawal symptom pain. And then that drives us to relapse, right? So basically, this loop is something that is so loud for people, the noise of how much of a failure they are, how much they can't do it. All of that negative self-talk is so um, it drives you crazy, right? Such that you're willing to do anything to shut it up. And that could be your childhood trauma. That could be just, your
Mm.
latest food binge that you don't feel good about. GLP-1s, which is the jab you're talking about, GLP-1 is a daughter molecule of something called oxytocin. So oxytocin is the mother molecule. It is what makes us feel connected to each other. It is what we crave. Like when we look at each other in the eyeballs, we get oxytocin. When we hug each other, when you and your wife hug each other, you give each other oxytocin. Sexual intimacy generates oxytocin. Feeling a part of a group makes you feel oxytocin. And the GLP-1 is a byproduct of that oxytocin, which basically quiets the habenula. It's one of two
Mm.
hormones that can turn off the habenula, the other one being melatonin.
Interesting.
So you have a really good nose, Jed, for this detective work because you're right on that the GLP-1's turning off the habenula, which restores motivation,
Mm.
which gets you off of the merry-go-round of that habenula addiction, terrible
Mm.
feeling loop, right? And it kind of like stops the ride so you can get off. So it's helpful to
Okay.
people in the short term because when you're in that loop, one thing leads to the other, and it's just a downward spiral, and it doesn't work out for people long term, as we both have seen in our clinical work, right?
Interesting. Well, you mentioned melatonin is the other. I'd not heard that. And many people, I've also been one that have used melatonin to reset my clock when I've traveled,
That's
across
great.
time zones. I've used
That's so
it
smart.
at times to go to sleep. Where does melatonin fit in? And I haven't
Yeah.
heard any, great use of melatonin like I have of the weight loss. Where does melatonin fit? And
So
uh,
melatonin, it's early days. Again, like, this research has only started to burst since 2010, and then over
okay.
COVID, from 2020 on, there was this asymptotic curve of peer-reviewed studies that were published on it. So what we know is that melatonin can turn off the habenula, whereas the habenula controls everything downstream. It controls the reward pathway. It controls all these other systems that I talked about. And so it's a lot of hope that GLP-1s can help us to get out of those habenula loops. Also, sleep, melatonin. And if you can't sleep, like you said, taking melatonin externally. I take tart cherry every evening to help boost my melatonin because, of course, I'm postmenopausal and I need that extra support, to rest assured, give me good sleep. And that turns off my habenula. However, these phones have been shown, the light from our phones have been shown to turn on the habenula. And what
Hmm.
that means is that if we're doom scrolling at night if we're on our phones at night, we are zapping our habenula and we are killing our motivation to live our life. We are
Whoa.
we are generating depression. We are generating anxiety right before we go to sleep. And so no wonder people can't sleep. No wonder people can't stay asleep. No wonder people wake up and they feel agitated or irritated or disempowered or helpless or negative or pessimistic. We have
Hmm.
abundance of those patterns right now among the human brains.
Well, this is so interesting and so vital, and I want
Yeah.
to talk about another area that that you talk about in the book, and that I had heard about when I heard about your book, which is that we're living in this era or this age of rage and anger. I wrote a book called The Irritable Male Syndrome a number of years ago, which I'll get into
Wow.
a little bit more when I have you talk a bit more about what's going on generally, in the society, particularly with males, because this seems to be a pattern in what uh, has been talked about as rage bait, that so much of our
Yeah.
systems are, and the economic system in many ways gets people energized by stimulating
Yeah.
this who's to blame and them and us. So where does all this fit in? And we'll get into what you now do about it once we understand it in some ways we never have. But talk a little bit about the anger addiction and the
Yeah.
rage baiting that is so prevalent these days.
Exactly. Well, one can think of the habenula as like a little. I went to Morocco once with my family, and my daughter wanted to ride a camel, and the camel has this piercing in their nose, and then they have a leather strap that they lead this giant animal around by this little piercing, and so the habenula is that little nose piercing. So if somebody's rage baiting you, they are grabbing you by your habenula, basically. And in nature, males are more susceptible to this for two reasons. One is that they are less connected to sources of oxytocin. Their oxytocin peaks when they ejaculate. So that drives them to mate. It drives them to
Mm,
reproduce, right? And so they're going to seek out oxytocin, i.e. GLP-1s, i.e. turning off my habenula by mating. But also, when they are in a challenge for territory, like, the zebrafish that I mentioned, it's been shown in studies that when a zebrafish battle happens between two males, the dominant male is fine. The losing male has his habenula flipped on, which is the painful state. And so what happens is that as the man is looking for a challenge, is looking for a fight, is looking for whatever, and all he has is a digital way of do that, then his brain is going to be susceptible to that fight in order to try to turn off his habenula and to get oxytocin. And conspiracy theories make you feel like you're part of a group.
mm,
Tribalism makes you feel like you're part of a group. And so being in that fight stance all the time as part of a group is a abnormal artificial way to get the oxytocin that we otherwise need instead of going out and connecting with real people.
uh, and connecting in positive ways that
Also,
is
yes.
all the ways that through evolutionary history humans, animals connect, so that the whatever the stimulus is that says there's a problem, we deal with it and then reconnect. If we
Hmm.
don't ever reconnect, we keep turning on the stimulus of problem, but we do either we don't solve it or we do something like grab our cell phone, which does the opposite of what we're wanting. So
Exactly.
I get a real, obviously I want to read your book so I'll get into more depth, and we want other people to read it as well, which we'll talk about. But talk about what are the ways in which, and maybe we can start with the rage baiting and the anger, because I think that's such a destructive and very obviously prevalent part of our society. What are the things that you can help us do individually as men, or in our communities to be able to reverse this trend and not only get where we can connect more deeply, but also be able to break the cycles that just make things get worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that men like you know, like I know that you have been working for a long time on giving resources to men so they can get their connection in a wholesome and healthy way.
Right.
You know, so I think it has to come from the men for the men. Us women, we can cheer the men on. But I think that men like you who are leaders, who are organizers, who are, good men, you know, can really help, create these brotherhoods. And men used to have more organizations to help them, you know, and those have been unfortunately hijacked by politics or hijacked by tribalism or things like that. I mean, it used to just be banter, my sports team versus your sports team. And that kind of created that challenge and that kind of like healthy rage, if you will. Like, oh man, you beat us in the last Super Bowl. Like that kind of
Right.
banter was healthier for men, but still it could channel this need for challenge and fighting and being warriors. And there was also wars in the past,
Right.
that we would send men primarily over to fight and things like that, and that banded them together. And so that sense of testosterone driving that sense of like I've got to be a protector, I've got to be a provider, and finding healthy avenues for that in this modern form is the design project of the century. It really
Mhm.
is.
Well, it's interesting, as you know, that I kind of stumbled onto this for myself years
Yeah.
ago when I was, it's actually after I had left medical school and I was, kind of in limbo searching for, I knew what didn't work. I was looking for what did. I was in a new relationship and in actually a new town. And I learned about a men's gathering that was happening that interestingly had a headliner of a researcher at the time. His name was Herb Goldberg. He wrote a
Mm.
book called the Hazards of Being Male. And
Oh,
at the
wow.
time, men were we all these benefits to being male, and men are superior. Well, I talked about the downside, the disconnections, the loneliness, the way back. So this is in the 70s
Wow.
and or even before that in the 60s. And so I got involved in a men's group that has now, I'm still in it. It's been meeting for 45 years.
Wow.
And just exactly what you said, we had a safe place to get close, to explore our feelings, to be able to, connect in ways that I think tribally, in the positive ways, Native American tribes and other native peoples all over the world connected when we were hunters, when we, were in not just connecting to get food, but telling stories and being there with each other. So
Mhm.
that was helpful. And my wife, Carlin, who she and I have been together for 45 years now.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
she says
wow.
one of the main reasons we've had such a healthy 45-year marriage is because I've been in a men's group for 46 years.
I'm sure.
So, so it's it really, what you're saying, and we've spread this all over, I've helped groups start. There are now men's groups, positive ones that really do this kind of real support work are
Wow.
more numerous now. They're happening all over the
Mhm.
world. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a really positive and hopeful sign.
Yes.
And what else have you learned in terms of what you share on many ways in which we can, change the way this part of the brain. Say the name again.
It's Habenula. Habenula.
Habenula.
Yeah.
Yeah, how we can, in a sense, better, have it working for us because clearly it's not something you want to eliminate. It as so
Right.
many other things, has a positive purpose, but it has been hijacked in many ways by our modern
Yeah.
lives, in other
Yeah.
ways by a modern life that is by design wanting to get people more, uh, you know, agitated in different ways that helps you sell products of one kind or another. So, what are
Exactly.
some of the other ways that you've found that can help us to learn and live in different ways than we have?
Yeah, so the habenula management, I think, is the modern skill. Like now that we as a species understand how important this part of our brain is and how, we kind of have accidentally turned it off. Now we got to get good at purposely turning it off. Like really
Okay.
good at working with it instead of against it. So our world is almost like so artificial with performative tools, performance goals, performance this, performance that. And in my research, I found that people who were able to change their behavior long term, no matter what it is, if it's mental well-being, if it's weight loss, if it's other aspects of health, to a fault, we're more using something called an iterative mindset, which is I'm going to turn off my habenula with reframing it, reframing the past, letting go of the past, having a different story, whatever the case may be, in order to psychologically turn it off so that I have my motivation back. And then I'm going to practice or experiment with something, not set a goal. That's very important. Have a practice, have an experiment.
Mm,
Let's see if I can get myself, let's see if I like it.
mm,
Then iterate or tweak it as I go so that it fits my life, so that, in case I get sick, I can come back from it. In case I feel like I'm failing, I can iterate instead. That means I can change the size, the time, the amount, the social aspect. Like I can, just basically adjust anything that I'm doing so that it works for me. And those people succeed and they because they don't ever strike their habenula and they're managing their habenula the whole time. So I think that's the way out is to A, know you have a habenula, and B, start to play with it. Start to say, why am I procrastinating? Why am I not doing what I said I would do? Why am I not doing what I want to do? Those are all signs that your habenula is on. And then what turned it on? Did I think I failed? Was I frustrated? Did somebody demoralize me? Is there something I feel helpless around? And then that's why my motivation is gone. And then also not blaming yourself, like your habenula's on. You're not a bad person. It's not over for you. It's not hopeless. Like it's just your habenula's on. How might I turn it off? How can I turn it off? Do I need to believe something else? Do I need to let go of something else? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need to
mm.
journal? Do I need to go out on a walk in the wilderness? Do I need to, some people do ketamine assisted, psychotherapy. Like there's different modalities to turn off the habenula. Some are hormonal, GLP-1 gets you off the merry-go-round of that loop, the addiction loop. I believe GLP-1s are anti-addiction medications, not weight loss medications, by the way, for that reason.
Hmm.
Do I need to take melatonin? Do I need to stop looking at my phone at night, turning my habenula on? And then the next layer is chemical. Do I need to get some sort of chemistry change? SSRIs can help me with my floor for a little while, but it doesn't turn my habenula off. Ketamine does turn the habenula off. It's not a lifestyle, though. It's a very, to me, a medically supervised treatment. And then there's also electrical ways. There's magnetic stimulation through the brain that turns off the other areas around the habenula and relieves depression, you know. And anytime you have a relief from depression, it's because your habenula is off because
Okay.
if it's on, you feel depressed. Let's put it that way. So there's all kinds of modalities, but the core thing is knowing that you have one, knowing that this is a problem, knowing where the
Right.
issue lies, and then being empowered by that, because then you can do something about it once you know what the issue is.
So, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our time today, there's so much more I'd like to ask you, and maybe we can do this again another time.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that that this almost new movement, it seems to me, of the
Yeah.
Habenula, you know, revolution or regulation
Yeah.
movement needs and has many different avenues, but I'm pretty well read and I have my ear to what's new. And I haven't heard about this.
Yeah.
And if I haven't heard about it, I'm guessing there's a lot of other people that haven't either. And maybe you're hearing about even the word for the first time from you as
Yeah.
we're. So
Yeah.
talk a bit about, let's just for now, since I've got you in front of me and not maybe there's hundreds of other people that are talking about this that I don't know about, but I got you. So what are the things that you are doing in these various venues? We know you have a book. We'll talk about where people can get the book, but talk about some of these other things that you're doing or that you know about that go beyond just reading, because these are action
Yeah.
things, things that need to do. And it sounds like you have a number of ways, channels, if you will, or ways that people can engage some of what you've learned over these, many both years of study and the
Yeah.
newest, latest research that you're, I'm sure, on top
Absolutely.
of. So talk about
Absolutely.
what's available now that you have.
Yeah, and you're right that, no one should feel bad that they haven't heard about this because, you are now if you are hearing about this right now, you are in the 0.1% of humans who have ever heard of this, right? So it's definitely very new, very cutting edge, and very fitting to you because, you wrote about male menopause way before it was a thing. So
Yeah.
you have a nose for the future, Jed. Um, so what we do, and I'm the first one, honestly, like I got here and I was like, is there anybody else doing this? And aside from the lab coat researchers, I'm the only one translating it really into daily life. And
Okay.
so that is something that I feel is my responsibility. So I'm not looking for fame. I'm not looking for all these things. I'm looking to bring the medicine to the people because this is a watershed moment in medicine and science. This is the most significant discovery around behavioral science and neuroscience in my lifetime. And I believe that it is as significant to mental health and physical health and how those will be practiced as bacteria, the discovery of bacteria was,
Whoa.
you know?
Yeah.
And so you're right, we are at the advent of a sea change in science and medicine based on this new information. And, fast forward 17 years is how long it takes basic sciences to make it into practice usually.
Right.
But fast forward, and I hope it doesn't take that long, fast forward a couple decades, we will see that this will completely revise our thinking around addiction medicine, around mental health, around behavioral medicine, around weight loss, around diabetes, around all of the things that we're trying to do as a human species, both individually and collectively.
Well, so let's start with how people can get the book, where they
Sure.
can find it. Secondly, how they can connect with you in the various public ways that you are available to people through your
Yeah, of
organizations, your business, and so on. And
course.
then before we end our little talk today, want to get, you and I can talk more about some other ways that I can help spread the word and connect over
I would
these
love
next
that.
number of years, because clearly there's a lot of spreading of information that needs to happen so that
Yeah,
people who at least are ready for this can be putting it into practice. And there's so many that are ready for something but are, in a sense, looking for love in all the wrong places. As a book I
right.
wrote a number of years ago. So looking for help, but not looking in the right places. So let's start with you. Where can people connect with your book and your work more deeply?
Yeah, so the book is Unstoppable Brain, the one you read at the beginning, and it is the anthology of all of the habenula science to date. And there's been some studies that came out since then that are even strengthening some of those cases. So everything in there is accurate. It's just more filled out since the publishing of that. But for the lay person, it's a really good primer on how to
Mhm.
understand this about our brains. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on all the bookstores, that kind of thing. And then my personal website is Dr. Kyra Bobinet, spelled on the screen here, .com. And I am going to be speaking in different places in 2026. I have a neuroscience of trauma class that I'm doing for PESI, which is the accreditation for mental health professionals, and a part of a course there. And so that'll be, kind of a massive online course as well as a live stream course. So I'll be doing a talk there in February 17th in 2026. And then, yeah, just doing other speaking engagements throughout the year in 2026, different conferences, things like that. And so, yeah, get a hold of me. I'm on Instagram as well. I'm on LinkedIn. So my team is able to post the latest and greatest from me. I also have a podcast under the same title, Unstoppable Brain, which we are going to be releasing in early 2026. So lots to come there.
Super. Well, I will definitely stay in touch with you, and we'll wrap it up for today, and then you and I can talk a little bit afterwards. And once I move that, we will chat, and I can get more details of how we can stay in touch. But I really want to thank you so much for sharing this wonderful information. I feel blessed that your people reached out, and I was able to go, yes, definitely, I want
Thank
to
you.
talk to her. When can we do it? So until we talk again publicly, we'll say goodbye to our audience now. And as I said to you, I will be putting an article together so that I can get out through my channels and my audience, and hopefully spread the word where people can start getting the information and putting it into practice.
May it be so. Thank you so much.
Indeed.